The tenderloin is where we met and stuck and snuck around like rats. The tenderloin is where I built and took away simultaneously. The tenderloin is where I could only think about the process of love through people who grew up without it. The tenderloin is where I dreamed a line that never came true. The tenderloin is where I turned myself inside out in front of a stranger to save everyone else. The tenderloin is where we confessed our darkness and searched for light. The tenderloin is where you carried me home. The tenderloin is where I had genuine hope. The tenderloin is where we snuck into the Strand Theater, scaling its walls, in order to steal old reels of pornography to project at a theater on California Street, perhaps. The tenderloin is where I sang songs into your empty ears. The tenderloin is where we saw the shadows of people through stained sheets. The tenderloin is where I threw you away and you kept coming back. The tenderloin is where your heart was a stranger and mine was an enemy. The tenderloin is where you watched me bleed all over the gurney. The tenderloin is where we kept a beat based on the thick blood in our booze-soaked veins. The tenderloin is where I realized. The tenderloin is where we slept in a Fleabag motel on your 30th birthday, and I wore a slip with a Kenneth Patchen poem written across it. Is that right?
You got it.
All right. The tenderloin is where I learned about love by figuring it out alone. The tenderloin is where you called me little one. The tenderloin is where I was honest and we were entangled. The tenderloin is where I bought your drugs from a man who told me I looked like his childhood babysitter. The tenderloin is where I made you act like a fool. The tenderloin is where I ran when it fell apart. The tenderloin is where I looked at you with new, affectionate eyes that extended to everyone. The tenderloin is where we argued and you threw my clothes out of a third-story window. The tenderloin is where I slept in sin and I knew it. The tenderloin is where we explained and explored each other's scars. The tenderloin is where I would teach myself to build you new bones and a new heart. The tenderloin is where I drowned and starved to find a female vice other than romanticism. The tenderloin is where you made me feel just like the others. The tenderloin is where I saw you sleeping next to her under covers of lies you told to me. The tenderloin is where I noticed the stubble around your mouth looked like specks of gold. The tenderloin is where I prayed for an avalanche. The tenderloin is where it could not have been stopped.
Yeah!